And of course, we are family members, FMs, and family members and friends. And for example, when we're real kinfolks KFs, we're real kinfolks KFs, and real kinships KFs, we're real kinships KFs, and we're real kinfolks KFs, and we're real family members, FMs, and family and friends, for example. Reading this aloud and saying this aloud as well, and sort of at the same time, and paraphrase, summarize, abbreviated quotations. And for example, a lot of entertainment resources, amusements, maybe very interesting books, theater, writing, jokes, news articles, NA, and news videos, and sort of be to continuation, and absolutely maybe concluded, and closed off, sealed off, walled off, and absolutely closed off, walled off, sealed off, and reading aloud, and the man and the individual person said, paraphrase, the people, the man, the individuals, the man, the individuals, the person said, paraphrase, quotation, summarize, abbreviated. Very important resource money's currency, subjective and objective, different resource money's amounts, quantities, sizes, and sort of so-called little, small, large, different heights and ratios, percentages out of entertainment resources, money's currency, supplies, materials, and resources, real critical mass, CM. So, for example, someone might say, "Oh, they need they or that individual, that person, those individuals, or they or us, or many of us, or they, them, us, we, many of us, or us, or them, or he, she, it, them, he, she." Them, it, them, us, many of them, some of them, that individual or persons they might need. For example, let's say they need about 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, about 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. Let's say, for example, about 90 or 91 for real critical mass. Let's say, they got about 60 or 61 out of about 5 or 6 days, after about 5 or 6 days, or 1 or 2 months, or 1 or 2 years, for example, for instance, so-called. Well, that would really help usually their systems of many of their fellow members and citizens, but unfortunately, that's not enough. Different radio shows, television shows, different fellow energy, reading this aloud and saying this aloud in paraphrase, quotation, summarize, abbreviated, different energy workers, research workers, feng shui, and the so-called Chalice and Lynchpin, and very important resources, monies, entertainment resources, very interesting, and amusements and resources, monies, and different sizes, quantities, qualitative, and sizes, heights, and maybe little, small, and resources, monies, currencies, a large extent, or real critical mass, CM, and very significant, very important VI, very important resources, VIR, very important resources, monies, currencies, supplies, materials, and resources. And the man individual said, paraphrase, quotation, summarize, maybe a lot of entertainment resources, and maybe very interesting, different amusements and resources, monies, and currencies, supplies, materials, and resources. For example, for instance, so-called, make extrapolation and generalization and inference, for example. Very important resource, monies, currencies, different so-called layers and levels, different so-called frames, layers and levels of security, ways to keep safe and sound, different so-called layers and levels and frames, so-called, and shielded, garbled, armor, fortified, encrypted, coded, shielded, garbled, and coded, and shielded, garbled, armor, fortified, encrypted, coded, shielded, garbled, armor, fortified, encrypted, and layers of frames, and levels, and layers, and shielded, garbled, armor, fortified, encrypted, soundproof, waterproof, fireproof, shielded, garbled, armor, fortified, encrypted, coded, shielded, cloaked, very well hidden, and shielded, for example, for instance, so-called. And reading this aloud and saying this aloud and prolonging this in strong strength, loyalty, fidelity, fiduciary, strong strength, loyalty, tough, terse, strong strength, loyalty, fidelity, fiduciary, strong strength, loyalty, beauty, wisdom, strength, powerful, strong strength, loyalty, fidelity, fiduciary, strong strength, loyalty, fidelity, fiduciary, strong strength, loyalty, fidelity, fiduciary. And for example, for instance, strong strength, loyalty, love, and strong strength, loyalty, fidelity, fiduciary, like, and different affinity, natural affinity, prolongation, natural affinity, natural love, natural affinity. And very important, and strong strength, loyalty, fidelity, fiduciary, love, oftentimes natural affinity, or liking, and strong strength, loyalty, fidelity, fiduciary, strong strength, loyalty. For example, for instance, so-called, we have a real DNA, genetics, genotypes, haplogroups, bondings, a real critical mass, or real biometric markers, biometric locators, and real DNA, genetics, genotypes, haplogroups, bondings, real critical mass, CM, and our fellow member citizens are dual members, DM, dual citizens, DC, primary, secondary, tertiary, primary, secondary, tertiary, first, second, third, and our federal members, citizen professionals, our culture family members, FMs, and family and friends, and our mamas, papas, daddies, uncles, aunts, uncles, cousins, nieces, nephews, and our federal members, citizen professionals, and our organizations, groups, militaries, government sections, species, ethnic races. And for example, for instance, so-called makes operations, generalization, inference, to be continuation, the continuation of many writings, books that are writing jokes, news videos, books that are writings and jokes, for example, a lot of entertainment resources, entertainment news, and of course, and very important resource of money's currencies are riches, wealth, resource of money's currencies, supplies, materials, resources, very appropriate and safe and sound about 100% of the time, very appropriate and safe and sound about 100% of the time, and very excellent, fine, and good about 100% of the time, reading this aloud and saying this aloud, a lot of jokes and bluffing and teasing and joking, and we're family members and friends, different books that are writing, movie scripts and books that are writing jokes, for example, for instance, so-called, and maybe reading aloud and saying it aloud, and very appropriate and safe and sound about 100% of the time, very appropriate and safe and sound about 100% of the time, and very excellent, fine, and good about 100% of the time, very excellent, fine, and good about 100% of the time, and we're family members, FMs, and family members, FMs, and family and friends, for example.